The old lighthouse keeper, Silas, was gone. He hadn't been seen in 3 weeks, not since the storm had raged and the sea had clawed at the rocky island like a ravenous beast. That storm, everyone in the village still shuddered at the memory of it. Even the most seasoned fishermen swore the wind had sounded like a woman screaming. Now, I'm here. My name's Thomas, and I'm the reluctant replacement, young, eager to prove myself. Or, at least, I was. The boat dropped me off that morning, the clanking chain a jarring sound against the eerie silence that hung over the island. The lighthouse, a skeletal finger pointing at the gray sky, loomed over me. It smelled of salt, damp stone, and something else, something acrid, like burnt oil and decay. The door was unlocked, which was odd. Silas was meticulous, almost obsessive, about security. I pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest, and stepped inside. The circular stairs spiraled upwards into the gloom. The air was thick and still, heavy with a silence that pressed against my ears. I lit a lantern, its feeble light barely piercing the darkness. The first floor was a single, circular room. Silas's cot, a canvas bag, and a few scattered books were the only furniture. But it was the drawings that drew my eye. Crude, charcoal sketches covered the walls, depicting monstrous, tentacled creatures rising from the churning depths. Their eyes glowed with a malevolent intelligence, and their gaping mouths dripped with what looked like thick, black ink. I shivered, attributing it to the cold. Silas must have been bored, I told myself. Old men with vivid imaginations. I climbed the winding stairs, each step echoing in the confined space. As I ascended, the air grew colder, the silence more oppressive. By the time I reached the lamp room, the small space at the top, my heart was hammering against my ribs. The lens, a massive, multifaceted eye, cast distorted shadows around the small room. The machinery, usually humming, was still. Then I saw it. In the corner, near the generator, was a pile of something. It was covered by a tattered canvas sheet. With trembling hands, I pulled it back. It was Silas. He was huddled in a fetal position, his skin a sickly gray, his eyes wide and staring, fixed on the lens. But he wasn't just dead. His face was contorted in a silent scream. His hands were strange. They were elongated, the fingers grotesquely thin and twisted, like the tentacles in his drawings.
A low, guttural moan echoed from somewhere below. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate through the very stone of the lighthouse, a sound that resonated deep within my bones. I grabbed the lantern and backed away, my legs feeling like lead. I had to get out of here, but the sound grew louder, closer, and it began to feel as if the lighthouse itself was groaning, shifting, reaching. I could hear a wet, dragging noise, a slithering sound that seemed to be coming up the stairs. Panic seized me. I scrambled to the window, desperate for a glimpse of the outside world. But the view was obscured. The sea was not the familiar expanse of gray I had seen from the boat. It was a swirling maelstrom of black ink, bubbling and churning as if a creature of unimaginable size was rising from its depths. Then, I saw it. A tentacle, thicker than my torso, rose from the ink, its surface slick and glistening, ending in a cluster of curl barbs. It slapped against the glass, leaving a smear of black slime. The lighthouse creaked and groaned, the very foundation seeming to tremble. The moaning below grew into a chorus, a symphony of inhuman sounds. And then, I saw more tentacles, countless of them, rising from the inky sea, surrounding the lighthouse, their tips reaching for the structure, feeling their way towards me. I was trapped. I could hear scratching from the stairwell, followed by the sound of something wet and heavy slowly dragging itself up the steps. Silas's drawings were no longer just drawings. They were a warning, and I, foolishly, had ignored them. The lantern fell from my hand, shattering on the stone floor, plunging me into darkness. I could still hear the scratching, the slithering, the inhuman moans, and I knew, with chilling certainty, what was coming for me. The last thing I heard, as something cold and slimy coiled around my leg, was the sound of the lighthouse groaning, as if in final, horrifying resignation, as it became an extension of the nightmare that had risen from the deep. And the screams, they finally stopped, replaced by the unearthly moans of whatever horror now occupied the lighthouse. And they would, no doubt, continue to moan for the next keeper, whenever the next fool brave enough, or perhaps just ignorant enough, arrived.